Whispers on Steel, Book 1 of the Railway Inheritance, written by Melody Gilly. Chapter 4. The rain had passed, leaving Yorkshire's hills drenched in late afternoon sunlight. Sonya wandered along the abandoned railway line behind her uncle's cottage, careful to avoid the still puddles that mirrored the clearing sky. Wild roses and brambles had claimed the rails, nature slowly reclaiming what industry had abandoned. She stepped carefully from one weathered railway tie to the next, balancing as she used to do on New York sidewalk cracks with Michael. He would always exaggerate losing his balance, making her laugh as they walked home from school. 25 seemed too old for such games, yet here she was, arms outstretched, wondering what her life might have been if her mother had never fled England. The small volume of Frost's poems weighed in her pocket, Michael's parting gift. She hadn't opened it since the ship left New York Harbor, since she'd spotted his distant figure running too late along the pier. The folded note inside remained unread after that first time, though she knew the words by heart now. Find your answers, then come home and tell me everything. I'll be waiting. M. The museum visit had left her unsettled. Not just the exhibits or the strange sense of being watched, but the weight of history pressing down on her. Her mother's journal burned in her other pocket like a live coal, demanding attention she wasn't sure she wanted to give. What if I just stopped? She said aloud to a curious robin perched on the rusted track. What if I just packed my bags and caught the next ship home? The bird cocked its head, unimpressed with her rebellion. Back to Mrs. Harrison's bookshop, back to lunch breaks with Michael, back to the comfortable rhythms of a life without these looming mysteries. From this hillside, she could see the village in the valley below, stone cottages with warm lights beginning to glow as evening approached. People with ordinary lives, untethered to decades-old secrets and mysterious railway conspiracies. She envied them for their simplicity, the same way she'd sometimes envied the Fields' children for their uncomplicated family history. A pub sign swung in the distance. The Railway Arms. The very thought would have scandalized Sarah Fields, but Sonya wondered what it might be like to walk in, order a half pint, and converse with strangers who knew nothing of her past. Perhaps there would be music, laughter, a young man with kind eyes who might ask her to dance, though her mind stubbornly conjured Michael's crooked smile instead. Cambridge waited too. Uncle Gregory had already mentioned scheduling a tour. She could lose herself in libraries and lectures and build a life around books rather than buried secrets. Become the librarian she'd dreamed of being in New York, perhaps write articles for scholarly journals. Mrs. Harrison had always said she had a gift for organizing knowledge, for helping readers find exactly what they needed. The track curved ahead, disappearing into a copse of birch trees. Sonya followed it, drawn by curiosity and the simple pleasure of walking somewhere her mother must have walked before. The trees opened to reveal a small clearing where a signal box still stood, weathered but intact, its windows clouded with decades of grime. She sat on its stone steps, pulling the journal from her pocket. The green ribbon had moved deeper into the book now, marking pages she hadn't yet read. With the setting sun warming her face, she opened the marked page. August 3rd, 1941. I saw him again today. Not at the office, but in the village. He was helping an elderly woman with her packages, laughing at something she said. When he noticed me watching, he smiled, not Sebastian's calculated charm, but something genuine that transformed his entire face. Later, he left a book of poetry on my desk. Yeats. Inside, a note for when the night trains keep you awake. His handwriting is like him, straightforward, honest. I shouldn't allow myself these feelings. Sebastian would never permit. But when James speaks, I forget all the reasons why this is impossible. Tonight, we walked by the old signal box as the sun set. His hand brushed mine, and for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt since arriving in Yorkshire. Hope. Sonya traced her fingers over the words, trying to imagine her mother, young, perhaps confused, finding unexpected tenderness amid dangerous times. Was this James, her father? The name was new, appearing nowhere in the earlier entries that detailed railway operations and Sebastian's growing demands. The gesture with the poetry book struck a chord. Was this where her mother had gotten the idea of hiding notes in books? Sonya had found dozens of little messages tucked into volumes throughout their apartment after her mother's death. Reminders, observations, bits of wisdom. And now Michael had done the same, creating a thread connecting her mother's past to her own present. The signal box loomed behind her like a sentinel from the past. Had they stood right here, her mother and this mysterious James? Had they watched the same sun sink behind the same hills, dreaming of a future together while war raged across Europe? She tucked the journal away, suddenly restless. The village lights looked more inviting now, promising connection and normalcy. Perhaps tomorrow she would walk down, visit the local shops, and introduce herself as simply Sonya from America, not Helena's daughter, not the keeper of decades-old secrets, just a young woman looking for her path. As dusk deepened, she made her way back toward the cottage. Uncle Gregory would be waiting with dinner and more questions about her mother's final years, questions she wasn't sure she wanted to answer. But for now, the image of her mother finding unexpected love gave her a strange comfort. Perhaps there was room in this mystery for tenderness as well as danger. The old railway tracks gleamed in the last light, leading away into darkness. Sonya pulled Michael's poetry book from her pocket, opening it to a random page. The lines seemed to speak directly to her situation. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. She looked back at the village lights ahead, then toward the darkening moors behind. Two paths, just like the poem. The comfortable life she'd left in New York, or the mysterious history waiting to be uncovered here in Yorkshire. For now, at least, her feet were set on the latter path, carrying her forward into the unknown. The cottage windows glowed amber against the deepening twilight as Sonya made her way back along the garden path. A thin mist had begun to rise from the damp earth, curling around her ankles like spectral fingers. Uncle Gregory's silhouette appeared in the doorway before she reached it, his form briefly eclipsed by the light behind him. "There you are," he called, his voice carrying across the quiet evening air, startling a roosting blackbird from the nearby hawthorn. "Mrs. Thorne's left us a lovely shepherd's pie, been keeping it warm near an hour." Inside, the kitchen table had been set with mismatched china that somehow looked deliberately charming rather than haphazard. A bottle of red wine stood open beside a stack of yellowing folders tied with faded string. The grandfather clock in the hall marked each second with a tick that seemed to grow louder in the silence between words. "Perfect time," Gregory said, pulling out her chair with a scrape that set her teeth on edge. "I've been organizing your mother's files all afternoon. Fascinating stuff, once you know how to read between the lines." His eyes gleamed with the excitement of a detective closing in on a long, cold case, reflecting the oil lamp's flame like twin candles. She had a brilliant system of notation, marking cargo weights with a dot above certain numbers when they didn't match official records. Sonya took her seat, eyeing the folders with growing unease. The shepherd's pie steamed invitingly, but her appetite had vanished. Somewhere between the abandoned tracks and her uncle's eager explanations. Outside, the wind had picked up, sending dead leaves skittering across the window panes with a sound like whispering voices. "I've also been making inquiries about James Morrison," Gregory continued, serving her a generous portion. The serving spoon clinked against the china with an unnaturally loud sound in the tense room. He was just a junior transport liaison during the way, but now he has connections to every major shipping operation across Europe. Curious rise for someone with his background, wouldn't you say? Sonya reached for her water glass, hoping her expression hadn't betrayed her thoughts. The glass caught the lamplight, casting prim-like shadows across the table that seemed to dance between the folders like darting secrets. "The Morrison Transport Group has offices in Berlin now," Gregory pressed on, unaware of her internal shock. "Right near where the old Von Vogel freight yard used to operate. And Sullivan's been seen meeting with Morrison twice in London this month alone." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks that momentarily illuminated the room in a flash of orange light. In that instant, Gregory's face seemed transformed into something harder, more obsessive. Sonya pushed potatoes around her plate. "Perhaps it's just business," she offered quietly. "Railway executives must have meetings all the time." Gregory leaned forward, lowering his voice as though the cottage walls might have ears. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight, though he hadn't moved his chair. "These weren't ordinary business meetings, my dear. One of my old Scotland Yard contacts observed them at a private club in Mayfair, the kind where serious men make serious arrangements. Morrison passed Sullivan something that looked remarkably like your mother's old logbook. The thought of strangers discussing her mother, passing her possessions around like contraband, stirred something dark in Sonia's chest. Resentment she hadn't known she harbored began to surface. The room seemed to contract around her, the walls drawing closer with each tick of the relentless clock. Why did she never tell me any of this? The question escaped before she could contain it, hanging in the air like fog. 25 years of silence, not a word about James or Sebastian or any of it. Gregory's expression softened momentarily. "She was protecting you, Sonya. What she knew, what she recorded in those journals, it made her a target." He tapped the folders with a fingernail that sounded like a telegraph key in the quiet room. These records could still damage powerful people, even now. So instead, she damaged me. The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. Left me with half an identity, half a history, half a life. From somewhere deep in the house came an inexplicable creak, as if someone had stepped on a loose board. Both of them froze momentarily, eyes meeting across the table. "Just the house settling," Gregory murmured, though his gaze darted to the darkened hallway. "Sonya, I'm sorry, Uncle. I'm not feeling well." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound like bones dragging. "I think I'll retire early, but we haven't discussed the Cambridge arrangements," he called after her. "Or what I found in the signal box blueprints." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on the banister. The wood felt unnaturally cold beneath her palm, as if it had absorbed decades of winter chill. "My mother spent her life chasing railway conspiracies and hiding from shadows. Look where it got her." The words came out sharper than intended. "Perhaps tomorrow." The stairs groaned beneath her weight, each step seeming to whisper secrets as she climbed. Behind her, Gregory's sigh mingled with the wind's moan through the eaves. In her room, her mother's old room, Sonya sat at the small writing desk, Michael's poetry book open beside her mother's journal. 2 men, 2 books, 2 generations of complicated feelings. The lamp cast elongated shadows across the faded wallpaper, making the floral pattern writhe and distort like living things. Outside, a distant train whistle echoed across the moors, like a ghost calling from the past. The sound raised goosebumps along her arms, despite the room's warmth. She thought of Michael's steady presence, his patient affection that never demanded more than she could give. Had James offered her mother the same? And had Helena turned away from that safety for the same reasons Sonya had left New York? The pull of the unknown, the need for answers, the fear of vulnerability. The journal lay open to the next entry after the meeting at the signal box. August 10th, 1941. James kissed me tonight. We were reviewing the Dresden manifests, and he noticed the discrepancy in the weight calculations before I could point it out. When our eyes met, something changed between us. "We're in danger, Helena," he whispered. "What we know, what these numbers mean. It could get us killed." Then he kissed me as though it might be our last chance. I should pull away, focus on the evidence, the investigation. But his arms feel like the only safe place in England now. Sonya closed the journal with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the room's stillness. Her throat tightened. Her mother, so practical and reserved in New York, had once been a woman who found safety in a man's arms, who risked everything for moments of connection amid danger. The Helena of these pages was a stranger, passionate, vulnerable, afraid. The wind rattled the window panes like impatient fingers seeking entry. Rain had begun to fall, each drop striking the glass with the precision of a typewriter key, composing some message she couldn't decipher. Downstairs she could hear Gregory on the telephone, his voice rising and falling with excitement as he shared some new theory with an unknown confidant. His words were indistinct, but their urgent rhythm carried clearly, the cadence of conspiracy, of secrets unraveling. The investigation consuming him was the same one that had consumed her mother. Was that her inheritance? Not just half an identity, but this obsession with buried secrets and shadowy conspiracies? A sudden draft caused the lamp flame to flutter, making the shadows leap and dance across the walls. For a heartbeat, they seemed to form human shapes, figures huddled in conversation, a couple embracing, a solitary woman fleeing. She thought again of Michael, of the bookshop, of the simple clarity of organizing novels by color rather than decoding hidden manifests, of poetry exchanged in daylight rather than coded messages passed in darkness. The train whistle sounded again, closer now, cutting through the rain's percussion with unsettling clarity. Sonya moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. In the distance, a single light moved along the supposedly abandoned track, Sullivan's night train, testing the old routes. Its headlamp cut through the mist like a searchlight, illuminating the glistening rails for one brief moment before disappearing around a bend, swallowed by darkness. The sight of it stirred something unexpected in her chest. Not fear, not resentment, but curiosity. Whatever had happened between her mother and James, between Sebastian and the mysterious cargo, between Sullivan and the modern-day Morrison, it was part of her story too. She reached for pen and paper, then hesitated. The paper seemed to glow unnaturally white in the lamplight, awaiting words that might bind her to this mystery forever. Who was she writing to? Michael, who waited in New York with his patient heart. Her mother, whose secrets had brought her across an ocean, or herself, still searching for the woman she might become. In the end, she wrote simply, "I'm beginning to understand why you left, and why you could never quite return." Whether addressed to her mother or herself, the words hung in the quiet room like a confession. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingertips, like time running out. The grey light of dawn was just beginning to soften when Sonya slipped out of the cottage. She left a note for Uncle Gregory on the kitchen table, gone to explore the village back for lunch, though she suspected he would still be asleep for hours, having stayed up past midnight muttering over railway manifests. The morning air carried the mineral scent of Yorkshire stone, still damp from last night's rain. Dew clung to spiderwebs in the hedgerows, transforming them into intricate crystal necklaces that caught the first golden rays of sunlight. Birds conducted their dawn chorus with enthusiasm, the sound following her down the winding lane toward the village. By the time she reached the cobblestone streets, shopkeepers were raising their shutters and sweeping doorsteps. The baker's shop sent out waves of yeasty warmth, drawing her toward a window display of crusty loaves and sugar-dusted buns. An aproned woman with flour-whitened hands smiled as she passed, calling "lovely morning" in a thick Yorkshire accent. The village came alive around her, delivery boys on bicycles wobbling down narrow streets, the greengrocer arranging pyramids of polished apples, the fishmonger setting out his morning catch on beds of chipped ice. A milk float hummed quietly along the road, the clink of glass bottles punctuating its progress. Sonya paused at the window of a dress shop, studying the display of colorful aligned skirts and high-collared blouses. The styles were different from New York's, more traditional perhaps, but with a certain provincial charm. A woman inside was arranging a silk scarf on a mannequin, her movements precise and practiced. The street widened into a small square where market stalls were being assembled. She watched as vendors unfurled striped awnings and arranged their wares. Handcrafted pottery, locally made cheeses, bouquets of freshly cut flowers. The mingled scents of lavender, beeswax and coffee created an olfactory tapestry that reminded her how far she was from the gasoline and hot dog aroma of New York streets. A small bookshop caught her eye, Bridgewater Books, its blue sign proclaimed in gold lettering. The window displayed leather-bound classics alongside paperback mysteries. Like a compass finding north, she found herself drawn toward its door, the brass bell jingling softly as she entered. Inside, the familiar scent of paper, binding glue, and furniture polish wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. The owner, a white-haired man with half-moon spectacles, nodded from behind his register. "Just arrived this morning," he called, gesturing to a display table. The new Graham Greene. Supposed to be his best yet. Sullivan Von Vogel adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of his reflection, dark circles beneath his eyes, hair slightly disheveled from another night of restless sleep. The night train testing had gone well, tracks still solid after all these years of neglect. Morrison would be pleased with the report. He turned his Jaguar onto High Street, the engine purring as he navigated around a newspaper delivery van. The village was stirring to life, unchanged in its routines despite decades passing. His family had once owned half the buildings on this street, back when the railway was kind and Von Vogel coal fed Britain's industrial heart. A flash of gold caught his eye, sunlight on blonde hair. He slowed the car instinctively, watching as a young woman paused before the dressmaker's window. Something in her posture, the tilt of her head, sent recognition coursing through him. Helena Matthews' daughter, here, in the village, alone. Sullivan eased the Jaguar to the curb, engine idling as he observed her. Unlike at the museum, where she'd been partially obscured by the shadows and distance, here in the morning light he could see her clearly. The resemblance to Helena was striking, yet incomplete. This woman moved with a different rhythm, less guarded, more curious. Her sundress caught the breeze as she turned toward the market square, revealing a glimpse of knees and calves as innocent as it was alluring. "What are you doing here, Sonya Matthews?" he murmured, watching her navigate between market stalls with evident delight. Far from your uncle's protective shadow, a hollow ache formed beneath his ribs, unexpected and unwelcome. She was the enemy, the daughter of the woman who had betrayed his family, who had stolen evidence that could ruin what remained of the Von Vogel legacy. Yet watching her smile at a flower vendor, accepting a sprig of lavender with genuine pleasure, he found it difficult to summon the appropriate antipathy. The careful plans he'd constructed at Whispering Pines, surveillance, strategic introductions, calculated manipulation, suddenly seemed mechanical and cold in the face of her unguarded joy. She moved through the market like someone discovering color after a lifetime of gray, each interaction genuine, each smile unpremeditated. She knows nothing, he realized, watching her examine a hand-knitted scarf with childlike fascination. Gregory's kept her in the dark, an unexpected advantage, but also a complication. His strategies had presumed a worthy opponent, not an innocent drawn unwittingly into a decades-old war. When she turned toward Bridgewater Books, Sullivan felt a jolt of something like fate. The bookshop had been his mother's favorite retreat, a place she'd taken him as a boy before illness claimed her. During those precious afternoons among the shelves, Elizabeth had taught him that stories held more truth than history books, that between the lines of fiction lay the secrets of human hearts. A coincidence, he told himself, straightening his tie as he left the car. A natural opportunity for reconnaissance. But as he approached the shop, watching through the window as Sonya ran her fingers lovingly along book spines, the mission that had seemed so clear at Whispering Pines began to blur at the edges. There was something disarming about her evident reverence for books, the way she touched each volume, as though greeting an old friend. Instead of entering immediately, Sullivan paused, observing her through the window. She moved with purpose toward the poetry section, his mother's favorite corner of the shop, where sunlight fell just so across the leather bindings each morning. Did she share Helena's love of Yeats? Did she read sonnets aloud in that American accent, softening her voice for certain passages the way her mother once had? The thought came unbidden. What if she had been raised here, in Yorkshire, knowing her heritage? What if Helena had stayed, if events had unfolded differently? Would Sonya have grown up visiting this same bookshop, perhaps even alongside him? Sullivan shook his head slightly, banishing such useless speculations. The past was fixed, only the future remained malleable. And that future depended on the Von Vogel lines running again, on recovering what Helena had stolen, on maintaining his family's legacy at any cost. Yet still he hesitated, watching as she selected a slim volume and opened it with evident pleasure. Her lips moved slightly as she read, a private communion with whatever poet had captured her attention. The gesture was achingly familiar. Helena had done the same during those brief interludes in his uncle's study when Sullivan, just a boy then, had glimpsed the secretary who would later become his family's downfall. The old shopkeeper approached her with the familiarity of a natural bookseller, pointing out the features of the shop. Sullivan could read his lips through the glass, explaining the organization system, offering recommendations. Sonya's face lit with genuine interest, asking questions, clearly in her element among the shelves. This was her weakness then, not fear or greed or ambition, but simple passion for knowledge, for stories. The realization shifted something in Sullivan's calculation, suggested new approaches previously unconsidered. Know your enemy, his father had taught him. But what if she wasn't the enemy at all? What if she was merely a pawn, as innocent as he had once been before the truth of his family's history had hardened him? The bell above the door would announce his entrance, eliminating the possibility of retreat. For a moment longer, he allowed himself the luxury of observation without consequence. She moved to a reading nook by the window, settling into a worn leather armchair with her selected book. Sunlight caught her profile, illuminating features that echoed Helena's but carried their distinct character. Stronger chin, higher forehead, a certain stubborn set to the mouth. The plan crystallized, adapting to this new information. Not intimidation, not overt manipulation, but connection. Find common ground, build trust. The old cold strategy melted away, replaced by something more nuanced, more dangerous perhaps, for them both. Sullivan pushed open the door, the familiar bell announcing his entrance. The sound seemed to hang in the air between them, an overture to something neither had anticipated. She looked up, startled by the intrusion, and for one breathless moment, their eyes met across the quiet shop. "Miss Matthews, isn't it?" he said, the rehearsed casualness of his tone belied by the sudden dryness of his mouth. "I believe we were at the Railway Museum the same day. Sullivan Von Vogel. What a pleasant surprise to find. Another early riser in our sleepy village." Sonya closed the poetry volume with a soft snap, her posture straightening as if bracing for impact. The name Von Vogel carried weight. She'd spent too many evenings listening to Uncle Gregory's theories not to feel a reflexive wariness. "Mr. Von Vogel," she replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, I remember seeing you at the museum, though we weren't properly introduced." Sullivan gestured to the chair opposite hers. "May I?" A moment's hesitation then. "It's a public shop." He slid into the seat with easy grace, placing his own selected book. She noticed it was Auden, on the small table between them. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, softening what might otherwise have been too severe a countenance. "Not many visitors find their way to Bridgewater's before 9, he observed. "Most tourists are still lingering over bed and breakfast eggs." "I'm not a tourist," she countered, though her American accent betrayed her immediately. At least, not entirely. Ah, yes. Gregory Constant's long-lost niece, returning to reclaim her Yorkshire heritage. His smile suggested the village gossip mill had been working overtime. Small villages, Miss Matthews. News travels faster than the morning milk delivery. Sonia's fingers tightened slightly on her book. "You seem remarkably well informed about my family connections, Mr. Von Vogel, and you seem remarkably unintimidated for someone sitting across from the village bogeyman." His tone was light, but his eyes studied her reaction carefully. Against her better judgment, Sonya felt a smile tug at her lips. Is that what you are? The local monster mothers warn their children about? According to some, he replied, leaning back in his chair. Especially retired railway inspectors with overactive imaginations. The reference to her uncle was unmistakable. She should rise, make her excuses, leave immediately. Instead, she found herself asking, and what exactly do these mothers say? Eat your vegetables or Sullivan Von Vogel will restart the night trains. A surprised laugh escaped him. Genuine, unguarded, something like that. Though usually with more references to ancestral sins and mysterious cargo. How Gothic, she replied dryly. Next you'll tell me there's a mad wife hidden in your attic. Wrong novel, he countered without missing a beat. Though Whispering Pines does have its share of creaking floorboards and family portraits with following eyes, the literary reference charmed her despite herself. You've read Jane Eyre, my mother's favorite. She had a particular fondness for heroines who spoke their minds regardless of consequences. His expression softened momentarily. Rather like you just did. Sonya felt her cheeks warm slightly. Force of habit. Bookshop employees develop strong literary opinions. Ah, so that explains your natural habitat among the shelves. He gestured to the poetry volume in her hands. Frost? She nodded, surprised. How did you know? You have the look of someone reconnecting with an old friend rather than making a new acquaintance. And your fingers kept returning to the road not taken. I noticed the page edges are more worn there. The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. My childhood friend gave me a similar edition before I left New York, she admitted. I'm afraid I left it behind at my uncle's cottage. A male friend? Sullivan asked, his tone casual, but his eyes suddenly intent. Is this standard village interrogation, or are you practicing for a career in detection like my uncle? He smiled, acknowledging the deflection. Neither. Just natural curiosity about a fascinating newcomer who reads poetry at dawn. The old shopkeeper approached with a tea tray, setting it between them without being asked. Thought you two might enjoy some Earl Grey, he said with the knowing smile of a man who had witnessed decades of literary flirtations among his shelves. Just pulled the scones from the oven, too. Mr. Bridgewater has been reading mine since before either of us was born, Sullivan explained as the older man retreated. He used to let me hide among the adventure novels when I was avoiding piano lessons. A rebellious youth? Sonya accepted the cup he offered, their fingers brushing momentarily. Selectively compliant, he corrected, breaking a scone and offering her half. My mother believed in creative interpretation of rules. My father preferred their strict observance. I developed a talent for navigating between the two. And which approach do you favor now? She asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Sullivan studied her over the rim of his teacup. I believe in understanding the purpose behind rules before deciding whether they deserve to be followed. His eyes held hers. What about you, Miss Matthews? Do you follow rules or make your own? I suppose I'm still deciding, she admitted. New York has its systems. England seems to have others. I'm learning to translate between them. Perhaps you need a native guide, he suggested. Someone who understands both the written and unwritten codes of Yorkshire. Are you volunteering, Mr. Von Vogel? Sullivan, please. And yes, I believe I am. He set down his cup with deliberate precision. Would you allow me to show you a side of Yorkshire your uncle might overlook? There's a small restaurant on the edge of the moors, the Heather Bell. They serve the finest Yorkshire pudding this side of the Pennines. Warning bells chimed in Sonia's mind, Uncle Gregory's voice enumerating the Von Vogel family sins. Yet something in Sullivan's manner, the genuine interest, the literary knowledge, the unexpected humor, made it difficult to reconcile this man with the villain of her uncle's tales. I'm not sure that would be wise, she said finally. Wisdom is overrated, he replied with a half smile. But caution has its merits. He retrieved a small card from his pocket, writing an address on the back. 8 o'clock, if you change your mind. No expectations, just good food and perhaps better conversation. He rose, leaving the card beside her teacup. "Either way, I've enjoyed our literary détente, Miss Matthews." "Sonya," she corrected, not quite believing her own daring. "Sonya," he repeated, her name sounding different in his accent. "Until our next chapter." Then, with a slight bow, he turned and left, the bell announcing his departure as it had his arrival. Through the window, she watched him check his watch and quicken his pace, a man with appointments to keep. She wondered who waited for Sullivan Von Vogel, what obligations claimed his time. The card sat on the table, its elegant script both invitation and challenge. The Heather Bell, 8 p.m., a crossroads, not unlike the one in Frost's poem. Outside, Sullivan's Jaguar pulled away from the curb, heading toward the outskirts of town where, unknown to Sonya, James Morrison waited at the Crown Inn with railway manifests and promises of resurrected empires. The bell's echo had barely faded when Mr. Bridgewater shuffled over to collect the tea tray. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, gathering the cups and saucers. "Quite the surprise, seeing young Sullivan in here," he commented, brushing crumbs into his palm. "Used to be a regular, like his mother before him. Haven't seen him browse the shelves properly in years." Sonya traced the edge of Sullivan's card with her fingertip. "You've known him long, then?" "Since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." The old man smiled, settling into the chair Sullivan had vacated. His mother, Rosanna, would bring him every Saturday morning. Lovely woman. Had a way with words herself. Published poetry in her youth, before the tuberculosis took hold. "Tuberculosis?" Sonya echoed, remembering Uncle Gregory's mentions of Rosanna but nothing about her illness. "Terrible business. Lingered for years, poor thing." He shook his head, the weight of remembered sorrow evident in his gaze. Sullivan was just a boy when she finally passed, 10, perhaps 11. His father never recovered from losing her, took his own life not 6 months later. Sonia's breath caught. "I had no idea." Sebastian and Elizabeth took the boy in after that, raised him as their own, though Sebastian was a stern sort, more interested in his railways than children. Bridgewater's eyes took on a distant quality. Might have turned out differently, young Sullivan, if his mother had lived. She had a gentleness about her that balanced the Von Vogel intensity. He gathered the remaining dishes, hands pausing over the card Sullivan had left. "The Heather Bell, is it?" A small smile crossed his face. Elizabeth's favorite. They named a dessert after her there, poached pears in honey and rosewater. "You think I should go?" Sonya said, more statement than question. The bookseller shrugged. "Not my place to say, miss. But in my experience, people are rarely as simple as the stories others tell about them." He lifted the tray. "Judge the book by its contents, not by what others claim is written on its pages." He shuffled away, leaving Sonya alone with her thoughts and Sullivan's elegant invitation. She tucked the card into her pocket next to Michael's note and gathered her things. The poetry volume went back on its shelf. She wasn't ready to bring another Frost collection into her life just yet. The morning had warmed considerably as she stepped back onto the cobblestone street. Market stalls now bustled with activity, locals haggling over the price of fresh vegetables and handcrafted goods. She wandered among them, thoughts still tangled in what she'd learned about Sullivan's past. An orphaned boy raised by his uncle and aunt, a mother lost to illness, a father to grief. The parallels to her half-formed family history weren't lost on her. Perhaps they were both products of absences, of stories left untold, of paths diverted by circumstance rather than choice. "Miss, miss," a voice called as she neared the edge of the market square. The dressmaker she'd seen earlier that morning hurried from her shop, a tissue-wrapped package in her hands. "You're the American staying with Mr. Constant, yes?" Sonya nodded, confused. "This was left for you." The woman pressed the small package into her hands. "Most particular instructions that you should have it today." Beneath the tissue paper lay a scarf of the softest pink silk, embroidered with delicate golden birds in flight. No note accompanied it, but none was needed. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the gift both beautiful and somehow intimate, as though the giver had glimpsed something essential about her in their brief encounter. "Did Mr. Von Vogel leave this?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The dressmaker nodded. "Selected it himself from our finest collection. Said it matched something he'd seen in your eyes." She looked pleased to be part of such a romantic gesture. "Will you be wearing it to the Heather Bell tonight? News truly did travel faster than milk deliveries in this village." Sonya carefully rewrapped the scarf, unsure how to respond. "I haven't decided," she said finally. But as she turned toward the lane leading back to her uncle's cottage, the scarf draped over her wrist like a talisman, she knew her decision had already been made. Behind her, the village continued its morning rhythms, unaware that ancient rivalries and buried secrets were shifting beneath its cobblestone streets like tectonic plates preparing to collide.